Good morning. I've always been interested in different systems, and systems that were brought to my attention through my early rigorous self-examination, rigorous adherence to meditation, proper postures, what I thought was the proper mental attitude, and the Renzai Zen background that I adhered to was very strict. It was like the samurai, like warfare. Meditation was diligent effort. And as I've said before, if you're not sweating during meditation, you're not working hard enough. But in this background of, at times, self-denial, well, ultimately, that's what it's all about anyway, isn't it? But rigorous discipline, willpower, if you will, was attracted to different systems that allowed some escape from this sense of rigor, this sense of trying or working so hard towards salvation, towards awakening. And one of the things that I played with, dabbled with very early was astrology. And I was interested to know that I was Pisces, the two fish, the duality, the good fish and the bad fish. And then I went as far as learning more about taking it Western astrology to a deeper level and looking at the influences of planets, the moon, and the duality of internal and external was reflected in this interest. And I continued, I even studied some about alternative to Eastern Vedic astrology. And even later in my interest, I even met a Buddhist astrology, Jampa Shaman, who's become a dear friend, even though our relationship has been based on 10 years, 12 years, maybe 10 years, I don't know, Jampa, check it out, 10 years internet connection. One of 2 or 3 real connections that's been entirely web-based that I've developed to date. And I think that's a pretty high success rate, 1, 2, 3. But I learned when I was finding out about Muktananda, known as Baba, in his early ashram days in Santa Monica, the early 80s. I was fortunate enough to have a session with his astrologer who lived alongside him in the ashram, Chakrapani. And it had a lasting effect on me because he said my life would begin at 60. Well, at the time I was 33. A year of great significance for me. Indeed, embracing my favorite number, 3 times 2. 3 and 3, not times 2, but 2 threes. And he said that, and you imagine I was taken aback. I said, well, what am I going to do the rest of the time? And he said, well, you'll be okay. And along with the gifting of this, which now I've reached 70, and indeed, life did begin in my 60s. Everything of significance in my life today happened in the last decade, almost. But he also said something that made me start to the process of lightening up, letting go a little bit. He said that I slumped. My posture, he said, was due to the fact that I felt that I carried the weight of the whole world on my shoulders. And I remember him laughing. I still have the audio of this session. And this man, Chakrapani, laughed so hard when he told me that I conducted myself as if I had the weight of the whole world on my shoulders. And he thought that was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. But I remember being a bit put off, a bit offended that, yeah, I do indeed feel like I carry the weight of the world on my shoulders. But at that time, I didn't know there was any alternative. I didn't know there might be another way. There was this heaviness that permeated my spirit, so serious at this time, especially about my spiritual practice. Having felt like I grew up so early because my father passed before I was 4, and being the oldest, having felt this responsibility for my mother and my siblings, brother and sister, I was quite a serious young man, and never really knew too much about playing, except in my swimming world, except in my rich fantasy life that I built underwater, my sanctuary, from years of training and competitive swimming. Other than this realm of being underwater, I was quite a serious young man. And this process of lightening up became the work of my next 33 years. In fact, my lack of success at an earlier age, I believe, led to my heart attack at 59, when I learned that the price of holding on, I learned the cost, the true cost of holding on. And somewhere around this time, I learned of a second system that has offered me a lot of insight and entertainment along my path of decreasing rigor, motivated by the fact that to continue this rigorous discipline was anti who I really was and would ultimately result in my demise from a heart attack. Times of awakening, dawning on 60, I was introduced to another system in a very unique, interesting way, as everything of interest has been for me. When you least expect it, I met this system called human design. I was introduced by interestingly enough, an astrologer. An astrologer had been astrologer for Osho in Pune, India for many, many years. Another fellow American, Deepak. And he introduced me to the system, human design. And he told me that he shared to me about having an experience running across Ra Uru, the founder, the discoverer, the conduit for the funneling of this information that came through a supernova of 1989, visible to us here on Earth. Well, Ra had an 8-day experience in Pune, in Abisa. And Deepak met him 6 or 7, when his teachings were just gelling, still in the process. And he was able to tag along with another guy that I met, Randy Richmond, and have private lessons with Ra. 1997, 1998, I believe, before the 2000s anyway. So he introduced me to the system, and I found out that it combined, among other things, Kabbalah, astrology. Kabbalah is the Jewish tree of life. Astrology, the I Ching, and other elements. And it was a synthesis coming together. And Ra's basic teaching the primary teaching was that we're 4 types, not unlike astrology, but having 12. 4 types, and it's also based on time of birth, just as astrology is. But he talked about a 90-day window, a 90-day period prior to our birthday. This 90-day window when the personality that was to be us, the energy, the force to be us, come and reside within us. So he talked about, he created a duality. There's the chart based on 90 days before you were born, and the chart based on your birthday. The previous one, that's duality, was subconscious, who you were inside, who you truly were. And the one at birth was the self that you presented to the world, your personality. And Ra talked about a lot of interesting things. He talked about multiverses. And even then, I was trying to get my head around the idea that how could multiverses exist? How could the possibility exist if everything is one? And then I started spending time with levels of energy. Energy realms can indeed, different energy realms, higher as well as lower than our existence now, than our human being existence, can exist simultaneously without any conflict or disruption of the real basic understanding of the oneness of us all. So this was a beginning of a stretching my mind. And things of interest, so many things of interest came out of my study of human design. I recommend it to all of you that are interested in, are curious about other systems, other ways of looking for explanation, looking for those aha moments before the big one comes in the process. So there's lots of discoveries, and most of it reinforced, of course, what I already knew. As a projector, I'm called. Projector with a piercing aura that can see into, immediately understand, penetrate 70 to 80% of the beings that I would come across. I could always see so deep. Of course, there was a few enigmas. Ra himself, a manifester. That 10% or 11% that just left me in puzzlement because I would meet a wall with my penetration, my glazed glare. Glazed in the sense that my face would always be blank, not really reflect what was going on, unless I wanted to, and I used it as an instrument. I used my face as an instrument to project what I wanted to project, what I wanted people to discern at the moment of discernment. What you see is not always what you get, is it? But look, I think most interestingly in this system, other than giving me more duality, one of the things that really supported, again, several things that supported what I already knew, so there was truth in it, at least for me. I repeat myself, check out human design. I have a friend out there, John Martin, Human Design Hawaii. Maybe start there and see if he's not your cup of tea. If he's not, there's other more mainstream, if that's possible, on this pretty obscure, pretty much unknown studies, science, as Ra would so often say. But I was taught as a projector to wait until I received an invitation, and because otherwise my gifted insight would fall on deaf ears and even be actively rejected, creating discomfort and denial amongst those that I shared my insight with. So this learning to wait, backing up my understanding of letting the world come to me, seeing what the world will bring. And trust me, it always brings. It always seemed to bring exactly what I needed, if not exactly what I felt I deserved. But it talks about 9 centers, and the chakras, we have 7 centers, and so they kind of correspond, except that Ra was given information that we had developed 2 more centers. And again, for myself, I felt that between here and here, between here and here, somewhere in my neck, somewhere I felt like I had another center. This is where the Blue Buddha resides as I speak. He sits on or in my vocal cords. So I wasn't sold. I wasn't convinced. I know there's energy centers. I know that when you hold your hands like this, I can feel the balls of energy. If I point them towards you, maybe you could too. But we do have these centers of energy. And I wasn't so sold on the chakra system, even though I was familiar with it, that it was sacred in any way it could be played with. Ra added 9. He talked about the ego, the sensing of the heart center, the ego center, the sense of self. And according to this elaborate pattern, certain of these 9 centers are active, defined in his language, and several are undefined. In rare cases, none of the centers are defined. A reflector who reflects the energy that people reflects back at people. And there's people like my brother who has all 9, 1/10 of 1%, all 9 centers activated. But my ego was not my G center, which is really the sense of self, my heart center, which is about willpower. I can will this, about discipline, and this was my whole practice in a nutshell. And because this was undefined, I could not, willpower wasn't available to me. Willpower was not healthy for me. If I tried to assert my will, Ra cautioned of a heart attack. Well, and I was asserting my will, not on others, but internally. Inserting my will on myself with my path, my Zen training. And it really wasn't the combination of a heart attack, of being introduced to this new information, learning that the deep resonance that this information had with me about willpower. I'm not one to make promises. It's not in my realm. It's not in my realm to exert my will, to use my will to create. And in the sense of dualities, we have willpower and won't power. And I don't have either of those. I won't do this, I won't. That's along the lines of promises. So I discovered, I was given permission not to make promises. I was given permission not to assert my will, not to use willpower against myself, not to use willpower, which I was tending to direct outwardly. I won't do this, I won't do that, I won't. This is in the lines of promises, isn't it? Anyway, just along my discovery that I would share with you. So his idea of multiverses resonated with me. His idea that strict training, that the mind was for entertainment purposes only. The mind was not the source of planning or thinking. He talked about the passenger, which is the witness, to watch the shenanigans of your mind. Even be entertained by it, but not to make decisions. Came through what he called type and strategy as a splenic projector. I was to wait while always tuned in to the instant, to the moment. Splenic is a sense of survival that comes with us all the way through the animal kingdom. The sense of knowing right now, sensing danger, sensing correctness, and this really supported, helped my being in the now flower, combined with waiting and watching. And a new precept, a new tool in my arsenal was the invitation side. Waiting to be invited to express or share my insights. I would always speak them out quite quickly, as quickly as I sensed them. But I found that as I got older, I didn't want to waste my breath. Why waste my breath on something, on trying to help? I think that was my motivation. Trying to help the others see what I could see so clearly, in the hopes that they could mitigate their circumstances. So those things, really reinforcing the mind's role in everything, is just for entertainment. Ra used the analogy of watching a movie. But probably all these things, the timing were extremely helpful on my own path. Being in the moment became all that there was. Recognizing that the mind has a role, but it's not what we think about planning and scheming and solutions. The mind offers no solutions, but it's also a tool that can be used. It can't be dismissed entirely. But this will, this self-discipline that was literally killing me because I'm not designed to exert my will upon myself or on the others. And that's what I call the legacy of the will. Today's chapter, Legacy of the Will, is my putting to rest gladly and with glee and joy putting to rest this heaviness, this load that Chakrapani said that I carry about the weight of the world. And just as much of a relief as letting go of the will, which again was inflicted inwardly. I wasn't aware of trying to force my will on those outside of me. But my wounds is what I gave to the outside world. And I could give those up. My wounds were in forms of promises. And when events in life conspired against me, seemingly conspired against me to keeping my promises, I met that with great disappointment as personal failures. I want to be a man of my word, but it's hard to predict the circumstances. Things change. So I gave up making promises. And this whole general lightening up, this whole putting aside the heaviness that I carried for so long, putting aside the strict discipline through willpower, because I could exert will, but at what price? And putting will into the realms of a legacy signifies to me a past. And the lesson to be learned is still contained within those efforts that never were very rewarding and actually, literally, were killing me. So, my point is here that some people have willpower, some people have won't power. The power to, some people can make and keep promises, but I'm not amongst those. Some people can instigate, some people can actively approach the world and manifest their will. And again, I'm not amongst that 10 or 11%. So there's a recognition of who you are. But just importantly, there's a recognition of who you aren't. Learning to discriminate. Learning to find what works for you. Not what somebody is teaching. Not necessarily what somebody is teaching. But something tailored just for you. And examine any options along your path.